we're going to be talking about this Sun USA article called Going to War, U.S. Military Preparing to Seize Ports and Airfields in Venezuela as Trump declares full-scale war on drug cartels. Let's run a bayonet through this souffle and see what collapses here, okay? Because full-scale war is actually not what the administration put out. Now, President Trump, we all know, says stuff. He says lots of things, but we kind of have to take what he says with a grain of salt. And because he's just framing the argument when he does that. And that's his style. That's what he does. So what does this mean? In the language of the memo to Congress, the administration called it a non-international armed conflict with the cartels. So that's like a specific legal framing here. It's not a formal declaration of war. Several other outlets describe it that way. They act like it's a full-scale war, as in if it's a declaration of war, we're going to be sending in the Marines and all that. But it's more of a formal policy term. And so the headline kind of starts out a little bit deceiving, but then it gets worse. As it's preparing to seize ports and airfields, I haven't seen any sourcing on that. On the night of December 20th, the early morning of December 20th, 1989, I was in a C-130 aircraft about 500 feet above where I'm standing right now, right at about 1 o'clock in the morning. There's an airfield that's off to my left. And what we were doing is we were parachuting onto that airfield as the kickoff gambit of Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama. Now, Panama was a country that we actually had relations with. We actually had, 22,000 troops stationed here. It might have been the only time in history that we invaded a country that we already occupied, but we had bases all over this country. However, the elected president, Omar Torrijos, had died under suspicious circumstances in a plane crash, and the man who took his place was a man named Manuel Noriega. And Noriega had been a employee of the CIA for years. When he took power, he started playing both sides of the fence, and he was allowing Colombian cartels to launder their money through Panama and various other criminal activities. So President George H.W. Bush decided to take him out and sent us down here to do that. Now, we were not coming to kill Panamanians. That was definitely not what we were here to do. We were here to find and seize Manuel Noriega and take him out and take him to justice. So we were acting as a sort of military SWAT team in a way. And to do that, we had to neutralize the diehard, what we called PDF, which was the Panamanian Defense Forces, that would have fought us as we were trying to do that. So we parachuted in to this airfield that's right over here. And we had some pretty gnarly firefights at the beginning. We ended up with 9 of our own killed in that first couple days, the engagements. And there were a couple hundred PDF forces that died as well in that fight. And then we took up blocking positions on the roads and the airfields. And we had another group of soldiers that took over, did similar things in Panama City and over in Colón on the Caribbean side. Anyway, long and the short of it was we invaded the country. Took about 3 weeks before we finally got our hands on Manuel Noriega, got him to give himself up. And then we left. We packed up and left, and we installed a democratically elected government. We helped them, gave them advice on how to rewrite their constitution and make a new constitution that would be more in keeping with modern Western standards. Actually, the constitution they came up with, I like a lot. One of the things it says is that all religions are welcome in Panama so long as they do not offend the Christian faith, which I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. But if you take that as a model, that invasion, and you look at what it took for us to come into a country which at that time had 2.5 million people and take over this country, hold it for 3 weeks. It took tens of thousands of troops, probably close to 30,000 troops for us to do that. It took a tremendous amount of air power. It took helicopter gunships and fast movers, A-10s, some armored vehicles, and a whole lot of logistics, whole lot of planning. Now, if we apply that model to what's going on in Venezuela, I don't think there's much evidence that we are preparing to seize ports and airfields in Venezuela, because if it were real, you would see it echoed in preparations that were being made and there would be a lot more preparations being made than what we see right now. This is speculative at best. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. There's always a non-zero chance that something like that could happen. I mean, I was on a jump clearing team. I was on a team that specially trained to seize airfields and other ports and things like that. I know what it takes to do that. Now, some of that training could be going on in the US right now, and doubtless there are jump clearing teams in the US that are amping up their training just in case. The operation that started Operation Just Cause on December 20th, 1989, we actually started training for that mission in September of 1989, and we trained very hard all the way up until the day that we left. There may be some training going on to that end in the US, but that doesn't even mean that the United States is serious about doing it. It just means we want to be prepared in case the civilian leadership of the United States decides that's what we need to do. But there would have to go out notices to mariners, air tasking alerts, all sorts of logistics pre-positioned to try to make something like that happen. And Venezuela is a much larger country. We're talking about 40 million people. So it would not be just cut and dry. Now, we don't have to take over the entire country to take out Maduro. We put a $50 million reward on his head. It's not out of the realm of possibility that there are some people looking at that number and thinking, I could probably pay my bills for that. And I happen to know what Maduro is planning to do tomorrow. And so maybe I'll make a phone call or two and see if I can collect that reward. That's the reason you put a big reward on his head. I saw one news item that's from a Venezuelan source claiming that we had raised that amount to $100 million. I have not seen any corroboration of that, but there are, you can imagine, a tremendous amount of rumors flying around in Venezuela. As a matter of fact, I want to show you some of the things that are happening in Venezuela. And this is a cell phone video that was posted on a Venezuelan chat board in Spanish. And I picked it up and thought, whoa, this is something interesting. Take a look at this. What we're looking at are military vehicles in Venezuela. And this one right here in particular is an anti-ship missile. I'm going to stop it right there. That's an anti-ship missile, a Soviet one, that is likely a P-15 Termit. The NATO designation for that is an SSN-2 Styx anti-ship cruise missile. Now, what does that mean? What is a cruise missile? What are we seeing here? And if you finish the video out, you can determine about where they are. If you watch here, you can see that sign right there. It says Buen Viaje, and it says La Cabrera on that sign. And they're going into a tunnel, or actually that's a toll booth. So I looked up where La Cabrera is, and it's outside of Caracas, going out to toward Valencia, toward the Colombian border. And there are several La Cabreras, so I can't quite pinpoint the place, but it's out that way somewhere. Now, let's talk about this missile here. The Soviet P-15 Termit is a Cold War leftover. So it's an older missile, but it has a large warhead on it. It's about 500-pound warhead. That weapon system, we've seen that Venezuelans have these missiles. There's some possibility this could be a silkworm missile, but we're talking about a fairly good sized warhead. It's big, it's slow, subsonic. It skims the surface of the ocean, and it's about 500 kilograms, so over 1,000-pound warhead. If one hits a destroyer in the wrong spot, it could cripple or sink a Navy destroyer. The problem they have is that these things use active radar to seek their targets, and that makes them very easy to jam or decoy, much easier than modern anti-ship missiles. But they still work if they were to flood the zone with 50 of them at one ship. That ship's not going to be able to, it'll get task saturated, won't be able to shoot everything down. Modern battle groups in the Navy are built to handle this kind of threat. They have layered defenses, long-range Aegis missiles can engage these sea skimming targets. Medium range ESSM or SM-2 missiles can intercept at closer range. And then if those miss, we always have the Phalanx Sea Whiz, which is like that R2-D2 looking thing with a Vulcan cannon on it. Not to mention there's chaff, which is just metallic confetti that they shoot out. It forms a decoy and breaks the missile's radar lock if it works. So obviously, it shows that the Venezuelans are moving these things around, getting them in place, preparing them to try to defend their homeland. That's all stuff that the United States would have to deal with if we decided to actually take and hold ground in Venezuela. The biggest reason I think that we're not going to actually do that is because it would pretty much sink President Trump's hopes of winning a Nobel Peace Prize. Let's say just he's declared full-scale war on the cartels. He's also said before that he believes that the government of Venezuela is the cartel. They call it the cartel of the suns, cartel de los soles. And there's a lot of truth in that. Without a doubt, the elites in Venezuela make a lot of money from drug trafficking. A lot of that filters down into the economy and it kind of props up the current regime, especially as their oil revenues dry up. Let's say that President Trump said, okay, that's it. We're sending in the Marines. What would it take? We would have to take ports and airfields. The ports would probably be taken by Marines. Airfields would probably be taken by Army Rangers. That's one of our specialties. A parachute in on top of it. We used to train to clear runways. You parachute on top of the runway, and then you clear the runway to make sure it's open. And then you hold blocking positions around the airfield to safeguard the airfield from attack. And then you allow aircraft, American friendly aircraft, to land and drop off a lot more troops and equipment and things like that. So that's how that would go. To keep that from happening, enemies will put concertina wire, the slinky barbed wire, on the airfield, and we'd have to find that and remove it. Sometimes they'll park heavy machinery like bulldozers or earth movers or something on the airfield so nobody can land there. Those Venezuelan anti-ship missiles are all part of the preparations that Venezuela is making. This is a boon for Nicolas Maduro because typically in a wartime, whoever is the leader gets a real boost in his ratings. And we've seen that in Venezuela now. Nicolas Maduro has gotten a boost in his ratings. But I do not believe that we're going to see a major invasion anytime soon.